From now on, I want your paycheck sent to my account. That's what my son told me one Thursday afternoon, sitting in my kitchen like it was nothing. He said it so calmly, as if he was doing me a favor, as if I couldn't handle my own money at 62. I just looked at him, trying to understand when my own child had become this cold. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said it was for my own good. Then he left. That night, he and his wife came for dinner like they always did. They walked in expecting food on the table, laughter, the same routine. But this time, things were different. Because I had already made my decision. If my son thought he could take control of my life, he was about to learn who his mother really was. My name is Maggie Doyle. I'm 63 and I live alone. I used to be a teacher for almost 30 years. People think retirement is peaceful, but most days it's just quiet. Too quiet. My son Caleb is 36 now. He works in Atlanta as a software engineer. He's married, has a big house, a nice car. When people ask, I say I'm proud. And I am. But behind that pride, there's something else I don't talk about. Disappointment. When Caleb was little, I worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. I cleaned offices at night and taught during the day. I didn't sleep much, but I didn't complain. Every time I saw him smile, I thought it was worth it. I wanted him to have a better life than I ever did. He was a sweet boy. Always saying, Mom, one day I'll take care of you. You'll never have to worry again. I believed him. I built my whole life around that promise. Things started to change after he got married. His wife, Amelia, was polite and well-spoken, always smiling, always saying the right thing, but I could tell she didn't like me much. She tried to hide it, but there was something in her tone, in the way she looked around my house like she didn't belong there. One Sunday, they came to visit. She looked around and said, Whoa, Mom, your furniture's so old. We could help you replace it, make this place more modern. I just smiled. I said, I'm fine with what I have. But inside it hurt, because everything in that house was something I'd worked for. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. After that visit, Caleb started calling more often, not to ask how I was, but to ask about money, my bills, my bank, my pension. He said things like, Whoa, Mom, you shouldn't be handling your finances alone. I can help you manage everything. At first, I thought it was sweet. Then I started to realize he didn't ask. He told. His tone changed. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a decision already made. One Thursday, he came by after work. I was having coffee at the table when he said it, so calmly, like it was nothing. From now on, I want your paycheck sent to my account. Just like that. No explanation, no discussion, like he was doing me a favor. I looked at him, waiting for him to laugh. But he didn't. He looked serious, confident, almost proud of himself. I said, You want what? He smiled. It's easier this way. I'll take care of everything. Bills, expenses, whatever you need. You won't have to worry about a thing. It took me a moment to realize what he was saying. He wanted control, complete control. I nodded slowly. All right, I said. If that's what you think is best. He kissed my forehead like I was a child and said, It's for your own good. Then he left. That night I sat in the dark for a long time. I couldn't stop hearing his words. For your own good. That's something people say when they're about to take something away from you. Every Friday, he and Amelia came over for dinner. It was our routine. I cooked, they ate, they left. That week, when they arrived, something was different. Amelia looked around the house, then at me. Her smile faded. Mom, what happened to your furniture? She said. I told her I sold a few things. I said I needed the cash. Caleb's face went red. You sold your furniture without asking me? That's when I saw it. The look in his eyes. Not worry, not concern. Anger. Real anger. How are we supposed to be comfortable here now? He said. Those words hit me harder than I expected. We, not you. He wasn't thinking about me, he was thinking about himself, about his comfort. His wife stepped closer and said, You're being selfish, Maggie. We come here every week to keep you company, and this is how you treat us? Selfish? That word burned. I'd worked my whole life for that boy. I gave up dating, vacations, everything, just so he could have a chance. And now I was selfish? I stayed quiet. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. But inside, something broke. Then Caleb said something I'll never forget. Maybe you shouldn't be handling things on your own anymore. You're getting older, Mom. You need help. I said, help or control? He frowned. You're being dramatic. I looked him in the eye and said, dinner's not ready. If you're hungry, go eat somewhere else. The silence that followed felt heavy. He glared at me, his wife grabbed her purse, and they left without another word. When the door closed, I sat down and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Anger. Real, steady anger. But under it was something stronger. Clarity. That was the moment I understood that my son, the boy I raised alone, didn't love me the way I thought he did. I was just convenient, useful, until I wasn't. I didn't cry that night. I didn't beg. I didn't call him. I just sat there and thought about all the times I stayed quiet, all the times I let things slide because I didn't want to lose him. Now I realized I already had. A few days after that dinner, Caleb called me on Zoom. His face filled the screen. Clean background, bright apartment, everything perfect. He looked successful, exactly what I wanted for him. Hi, Mom, he said, smiling like nothing had happened. How are you doing? I'm fine, I answered, though my voice was flat. He leaned closer to the camera. Listen, I've been thinking. You shouldn't have to worry about bills and payments anymore. I can handle those for you. I stayed quiet, unsure if I'd heard him right. He kept talking. Mom, I just don't want you to get scammed. You know how many older people fall for those phone calls and fake emails. It's too easy to lose everything. Let me take care of your pension account. I'll make sure all your bills, taxes, and utilities are paid on time. I said, but I've been managing my bills just fine, Caleb. I still remember everything. I'm not. He cut me off. Mom, I know you're not. I'm just trying to help. You've done enough. Let me handle it. Something about the way he said it made me uneasy. It wasn't really a suggestion. It sounded like a command wrapped in kindness. Don't be stubborn, he added with a half smile. You've worked all your life. Let me do this for you. Then Amelia appeared in the frame sitting next to him. Hi, Mom, she said softly. You know, I used to work in finance. It's really better if Caleb manages it. You'll have less stress that way. She said it like she was giving me advice about vitamins, calm, polite, rehearsed. I looked at both of them on that screen, my son and his wife, and for the first time I felt small. Not old, just small. Like my opinion didn't matter anymore. I nodded slowly. All right, I said, even though I wasn't sure what I was agreeing to. Caleb smiled with relief. Good. I'll send you some forms to sign. Just basic stuff so I can handle the payments for you. He said it casually, like we were talking about groceries. After the call ended, I sat in my kitchen staring at my reflection on the black screen. My hands were trembling, though I didn't know why. He was trying to help, wasn't he? That's what he said. That's what any good son would say, but something about it didn't feel like help. It felt like a transaction. Later that evening, I made myself tea and kept thinking about the way he spoke to me. The tone, the look in his eyes. It wasn't love, not the kind I remembered from when he was little. It was control dressed up as care. When did that change happen? When did he stop seeing me as his mother and start seeing me as someone to manage? The next morning he texted me, Mom, don't forget to sign the papers I emailed you. It's time sensitive. Time sensitive, like it was a job. I opened the email. There were several documents attached, forms with my name, account numbers, and a line for my signature. I scrolled through, not really understanding all the fine print. I didn't want to sign anything I didn't understand. So I called him. Caleb, what exactly are these papers? He sighed, the kind of sigh people give when they're tired of explaining. Mom, it's just authorization so I can access your account. That way, I can make transfers and pay bills without needing you to log in every time. Access? I asked. You mean you'd have control over my pension? He laughed lightly. Mom, don't make it sound so dramatic. It's just easier this way. Easier for who? I didn't ask that out loud. I just said, I'll look it over. Sure, he replied, but don't overthink it. It's for your own good. There it was again. That phrase, for your own good. I'd heard it before, the same words he said when he wanted my paycheck sent to his account. I closed the email and sat back in my chair. My stomach felt tight. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe he really was just trying to help. But my gut told me something was wrong. I decided to wait, not to sign anything until I was sure. The following evening he called again. This time his tone was sharper. "Mom, why haven't you signed the papers yet?" "I just want to read them carefully," I said. He frowned. "There's nothing to read. I'm trying to protect you. Don't you trust me?" That question hit me like a knife. Of course I trusted him. He was my son. But the way he said it, like a test, made my heart ache. I said, "I do trust you, Caleb. I just want to be careful." He looked at me for a long time, then sighed. "You've always been like this. Too cautious. It's exhausting." Then Amelia chimed in again, her tone soft but firm. "Maggie, this is really for your benefit. You're lucky Caleb is so responsible." Lucky? That word stung. I nodded again, pretending to agree, but my mind was spinning. After they hung up, I stared at my phone, then at the forms still sitting unopened in my inbox. I didn't know what to do yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Something about this didn't feel like love anymore. It felt like someone tightening a rope around my life, one helpful gesture at a time. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing his voice in my head, calm, polite, certain, "For your own good." It didn't sound like my son anymore. It sounded like someone else, someone who believed he had the right to take charge of me. A few days after our last call, Caleb sent me an email. The subject line said, "Authorization form, easy transfer setup." I opened it right after breakfast. It looked official, full of words I didn't really understand. Automatic deposit, joint access, beneficiary authorization. I scrolled quickly, thinking it was just a simple banking update. Then I saw a message from Caleb at the top. "Mom, it's just a standard form so I can help you handle everything. You won't have to worry about bills or payments anymore. Just sign it and send it back. It'll make life easier for both of us." I remember sitting there reading that line over and over. Make life easier for both of us. I didn't want to bother him. He had his job, his marriage, his life. I didn't want to sound ungrateful or suspicious. So I clicked the signature box, drew my name with my finger on the screen, and that was it. One small motion, one click, and my trust was sealed. I didn't think about it again for a few days. Life went on as usual. I watched my shows, tended my little garden, made soup for myself. I even felt proud for learning how to sign something electronically. I thought it meant I was keeping up with technology. A week later, I went to the grocery store. When I tried to pay, my card didn't go through. The cashier tried again, then said quietly, "I'm sorry, ma'am, it's not approving." I felt my face turn hot. I told her I must have used the wrong card. But I hadn't. That was my main account, the one my pension always went into. When I got home, I called the bank. The woman on the phone asked for my details, then put me on hold. After a few minutes, she came back and said, "Mrs. Doyle, your account is currently linked to a secondary account under the name of Mr. Caleb Doyle. All pension deposits are now routed through that account, according to the authorization form we received last week." My throat went dry. I said, "I didn't authorize that." She replied gently, "Ma'am, we have your digital signature right here. Would you like me to email you a copy?" I said yes, even though my hands were shaking. A few minutes later, it arrived. I opened the attachment and saw it, my own name at the bottom of the form, glowing blue. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't remember signing that. I didn't remember agreeing to transfer my entire pension. But there it was, my name. It's strange, isn't it? You spend decades teaching your child not to lie, not to cheat, not to steal, and one day you'll realize what you should have been teaching them not to do it to you. I called Caleb right away. My voice was trembling. "Caleb, why did you connect my pension to your account?" He sounded calm, too calm. "Mom, I told you. It's easier this way. I'm handling your bills. You won't have to do a thing." "You didn't tell me you were moving my money," I said. "You said you'd just help manage payments." He sighed like I was a child making a fuss. "Mom, it's the same thing. The money's still yours. I'm just helping." "Then why didn't you ask me first?" I asked. His tone hardened. "Because you always overthink everything. I didn't want you to stress out. I'm doing this for you." I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I just sat there, holding the phone, feeling my heart pound in my chest. He said it again, "For you." Those two words had become his shield, his excuse for everything. When we hung up, I sat there for a long time, just listening to the ticking of the clock. My whole body felt numb. I checked my online banking account. It showed a new link, joint account, C. Doyle. There were automatic transfers I didn't recognize, hundreds of dollars going out every few days. The balance left was almost nothing. It felt like someone had reached into my pocket, taken everything, and smiled while doing it. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? My son took my money? It sounded ridiculous, shameful. I didn't want people to think I'd raised a thief. That night, I sat in front of my laptop and opened the same PDF file again. My signature stared back at me clear as day. I'd done it. I'd given him the power. And that's when it hit me. I hadn't been scammed by a stranger. I'd been tricked by someone who knew exactly how to talk to me, how to make me feel safe, how to make me trust. Someone who used my love as the password. I turned off the laptop and sat in the dark. My heart hurt in a way I can't explain. Not from money, but from betrayal. I had spent my whole life protecting that boy from pain, and now he was the one causing it. I thought of all the nights I stayed up working, all the birthdays I missed because I was teaching late, all the times I told myself it was worth it, because one day he'd take care of me, and I realized that one day had come, just not in the way I imagined. The morning after I found out my money was gone, I barely slept. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept telling myself there must be some mistake, maybe a delay, maybe an error at the bank, something small, something fixable. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my purse and went to the bank, the same one I'd used for over 20 years, the same place where the tellers used to call me Mrs. Doyle with a smile and ask how my students were. When it was my turn, I handed my card to a young woman behind the counter. She looked no older than 25. "I'd like to check my account balance, please," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She typed something on her computer, then frowned. "Do you want me to print a full statement for you?" "Yes," I said. My stomach already knew what my mind refused to accept. She printed the paper and slid it across the counter. I looked down and froze. "Take my money. He said he was just going to help me pay bills." The young woman looked uncomfortable. She glanced around, lowered her voice. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Legally, he has the same rights as you do. We can't reverse those transfers unless he agrees to it." I felt my chest tighten. I asked, "There's really nothing you can do?" She looked down at her hands and whispered, "I'm sorry." That's all she said. 2 words. And somehow it felt like the end of everything I'd worked for. I walked out of the bank in a daze, holding that paper like it was proof that my life had been taken from me in black and white. I don't remember how long I stood there. Cars passed, people talked, the world moved. But for me, everything had stopped. I sat on a bench nearby and stared at the numbers again. 12 transactions. I counted them one by one, as if doing that could somehow undo them. All those years, every extra hour I worked, every holiday I skipped, every penny I saved. All gone. Not stolen by a stranger, but transferred, authorized, processed, approved by my own son. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. There was just this dull ache in my chest, like something heavy pressing down. I thought about walking to his house, knocking on his door, and demanding an explanation. But what would I even say? He'd just smile, that calm, tired smile, and tell me I was overreacting. He'd say it was for my own good. I didn't want to hear it again. So I walked. I don't even remember where I was going. I just needed to move. My legs took me through blocks I'd known for years, but everything felt different. The streets looked sharper, colder. I could feel the eyes of people around me. Not that they knew what had happened, but somehow I felt exposed, like everyone could see I'd been made a fool of. By the time I reached home, it had started raining. Not a heavy storm, just that slow, steady rain that seems to follow sad days. I didn't bother with an umbrella. I let it fall on me. Maybe I thought the rain could wash away the shame I felt. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table and laid out the paper from the bank. The ink had smudged a little where the drops had fallen on it. I traced the numbers with my finger, like maybe they'd change if I touched them. But they didn't. They never do. I picked up the phone and called Caleb again, straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I didn't even know what to say anymore. I used to call him when the car broke down, when I was lonely, when I had good news. Now, I couldn't even call him to ask about my own money. That night, I made myself a cup of tea but couldn't drink it. I sat staring at it until it went cold. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like it's judging you. I looked around at the walls, the photos, the small life I'd built. It all looked the same, but something inside me had shifted. The world had tilted. I kept hearing my own voice in my head saying, "He wouldn't do that. Not Caleb. Not my son." But the paper was still there. The numbers were still there. And then another voice, smaller but sharper, whispered back, "He already did." I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe hours. Eventually, I folded the statement and put it in a drawer. I didn't want to look at it anymore. I didn't want to believe it was real. But the truth doesn't go away just because you hide it. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. I thought about every warning sign I'd ignored. Every time he told me not to worry. Every time he cut me off mid-sentence. Every, "It's easier this way." Every, "Don't be stubborn." And I realized something I should have seen from the start. Every mistake I'd made began with two simple words: I trusted. After I found out about the money, I spent 2 nights thinking about what to do. I didn't sleep much. I kept staring at the ceiling, asking myself if this was really happening. Every part of me wanted to believe it was some misunderstanding, that he'd fix it once I told him face to face. So on Saturday morning, I got dressed, took the bus, and went to his apartment. I didn't call first. I just needed to see him. I needed to look my son in the eye. When I knocked, Amelia opened the door. Her face froze for a second before she smiled. "Oh, Maggie, you didn't tell us you were coming." She stepped aside but didn't move far enough for me to walk in comfortably. "The place is a little messy today," she added, crossing her arms. Messy? The apartment looked spotless through the doorway, like something out of a magazine. "Is Caleb home?" I asked. "He's here," she said, turning her head. "Caleb, your mom's here." I heard his voice from inside, calm but distant. "Coming." He appeared a moment later, wearing a white shirt, no expression on his face. "Mom," he said flatly. "You should have called first." "I didn't think I needed an appointment to see my own son," I said. My voice shook a little, but I kept my chin up. He sighed and rubbed his forehead like I was a problem to solve. "What's going on? You sound upset." "You know exactly what's going on," I said. "I went to the bank." He looked away for a second. "Mom, if this is about the account, we already talked about this. You signed the form." "You didn't tell me what it was for," I said, my voice rising. "You said you'd help me with bills, not take everything I have." He laughed softly, that quiet laugh people use when they think they're smarter than you. "Mom, I didn't take anything. I'm just managing your finances. You don't have to deal with all that stress anymore." I stared at him. "Managing it by moving every penny out of my account?" He shook his head. "You don't understand. This is for your protection. You're not young anymore, and you don't see how easy it is to get scammed these days. One wrong click, one phone call, and you could lose everything." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. "I already did lose everything, Caleb. You took it." He looked annoyed now. "You're being dramatic." "I'm being stolen from," I said. "That's not drama." Amelia walked closer, putting her hand on his arm. "Maggie," she said gently, "we only want what's best for you. Caleb's just trying to protect you. You've worked your whole life. Let him handle things. It's time for you to relax." I looked at her. Her voice was soft, but her smile wasn't kind. It was the kind of smile people use when they've already made up their minds. "You keep saying you're protecting me," I said quietly. "But from what? From myself?" Amelia didn't answer. Caleb stepped in again. "Mom, you're blowing this out of proportion. You signed the papers, you agreed. Don't start accusing me now." "I didn't agree to this," I said. "I didn't agree to being treated like a child." He let out a small laugh, shaking his head. "You're impossible sometimes. You think everyone's out to get you. I'm your son, Mom. I'm the only one who's ever taken care of you." That sentence hit hard. The only one who's ever taken care of you. It was true, but it didn't make what he did right. "You didn't take care of me," I said. "I took care of you all your life." His face changed for a second, on something like guilt. Then it hardened again. "You don't need to bring up the past." "I do," I said, "because that's the only reason I'm standing here right now, trying to understand how the boy I raised became someone who could do this to me." He rolled his eyes. "You make it sound like I robbed you. I didn't. The money's safe." "Safe with you," I said. Not with me. For a moment, no one spoke. Amelia stood with her arms crossed. Caleb's jaw tightened, and I realized I wasn't talking to my son anymore. I was talking to someone else, someone colder. Finally, I said, "Caleb, I want my money back." He looked at me like I'd asked for something unreasonable. "Mom, don't start this again. I'm serious. You return it or I'll go to the bank, to the police, to whoever I have to." Amelia stepped forward quickly. "Maggie, calm down. You're misunderstanding everything. If you make a scene, you'll just embarrass yourself." Her tone was still polite, but the words were sharp. "Embarrass myself?" I repeated. "You think I care about that now?" Caleb looked around the room, his voice lower but full of irritation. "Mom, you should know better than to threaten your own family. Don't make this ugly." I stared at him. "You already did that." The silence after that was so heavy I could hear the sound of the clock ticking somewhere behind me. He didn't say another word. Neither did I. I took a deep breath. "You know," I said softly, "I might be old, but I'm not stupid. And I'm not weak. I may not have much left, but I still have my name, my dignity, and that's something you can't touch." For a second, I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes. Maybe guilt, maybe anger, but it didn't matter anymore. I turned toward the door. Amelia said quietly, "Maggie, please don't leave like this." I stopped, looked back at her, and said, "You two keep saying you're doing this out of love, but love doesn't take away someone's freedom. Love doesn't use fear to control." Then I opened the door. Behind me, I heard Caleb's voice, sharp and cold. "You should know when to stop, Mom. Don't make me do something I'll regret." I didn't answer. I stepped out and closed the door behind me. For a moment, I stood there in the hallway, just breathing. The air felt heavy, but I also felt lighter somehow, like something inside me had finally broken free. As I walked away, I realized that door wasn't just closing on his apartment. It was closing on something much bigger, the relationship I'd built my whole life around. That night, I couldn't sit still. The rain had stopped, but the sound of it still echoed in my head. I didn't want to be alone in that quiet house anymore. So I put on my sweater and walked next door to Gloria's place. Gloria Whitmore had been my neighbor for almost 20 years. We weren't close the way some people are, but there was always kindness between us. She was the kind of woman who noticed when you hadn't been out in a few days, who'd show up at your door with soup just because. When she opened the door, she looked surprised. "Maggie, you're out late?" "I couldn't sleep," I said. She nodded slowly. "Come in. I was just making tea." Her kitchen was small, warm, and smelled faintly of lemon and honey. We sat at her old wooden table, 2 mugs steaming between us. Neither of us said much at first. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind that understands. Finally, Gloria said quietly, "You look like you've been carrying something heavy." I stared down at my tea. "My son took everything. My pension, my savings, all of it. I trusted him." She didn't interrupt. She just nodded like she'd heard this kind of pain before. After a moment, she sighed. "You know, that happened to me once. Not exactly the same, but close." I looked up. "Really?" She gave a tired smile. "My boy tried to make me sell this house. Said he wanted to invest the money for me. Told me it was better than letting it sit in bricks and dust. Said it would secure my future." "What did you do?" I asked. She looked straight at me. "I didn't sign a thing." Her voice was calm but firm, a voice that had learned its strength the hard way. "He didn't talk to me for 2 years after that," she continued. "Didn't visit, didn't call. I thought I'd lost him. But then, one day, he came back, not to apologize, just to ask for something else. And that's when I realized something important. Sometimes love and control wear the same face." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The words hit too close. Gloria took a sip of tea, then reached over and placed her hand on mine. "Maggie, loving your child doesn't mean giving them everything. It doesn't mean handing over your life, your home, your money, your peace. It means teaching them that love has limits, that you still belong to yourself." I felt my throat tighten. He said he just wanted to help, that he was protecting me. She nodded slowly. "They always say that. I'm doing it for you. But you know what I learned? If someone needs to take your freedom to prove their love, then it's not love anymore, it's ownership. Her words stayed in the air between us, heavy but true. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling slightly. She squeezed my fingers gently. You still have choices, Maggie. As long as you're alive, you get to decide who touches your life and who doesn't. Don't let him make you believe you're powerless. The room went quiet again. The clock on the wall ticked softly. I could hear the wind outside brushing against the window. I whispered, I thought I was protecting him all these years. Turns out I was just making it easy for him to hurt me. Gloria didn't argue. She just nodded again, eyes full of a quiet understanding that only another mother could have. We sat like that for a while. Two women who'd both loved too much, both paid the price for it. When I finally stood up to leave, Gloria walked me to the door. You'll be all right, she said softly. You're stronger than you think. And remember, you don't need to shout to fight back. Sometimes the quiet kind of strength is the one that wins. I smiled weakly, though my eyes burned. Thank you, Gloria. She touched my arm before I stepped out. One more thing, she said, keep proof of everything. Every message, every withdrawal, every word. Don't do it for revenge. Do it so when you decide to stand up, you'll have the truth on your side. Those words echoed in my head all the way home. When I got back, the house felt different. Not empty this time, just quiet in a way that gave me room to think. I made myself another cup of tea and sat down at my laptop. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but something told me I needed to see it with my own eyes. I opened my email, my bank history, old folders I hadn't touched in months. Then I remembered the small security camera I'd installed in the living room last year, after a break-in scare down the street. I hadn't checked it in a long time. I clicked through the stored footage, days and weeks passing in fast motion, empty rooms, morning light, me watering plants. Then I stopped. There he was. Caleb. 3 months ago. He'd come over while I was in the shower. I saw him walk into the living room, glance around, then pick up my purse from the table. He took out my wallet, slid my debit card halfway out, looked at it, then slipped it back in. It lasted maybe 5 seconds. 5 seconds that changed everything. I froze, watching the clip again. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing. But there it was, clear as day. I sat back in my chair, my hands covering my mouth. There were no tears this time. Just a deep, steady anger that felt like waking up from a long sleep. Gloria's voice echoed in my mind. Don't do it for revenge. Do it to get yourself back. I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it Proof. Then I started saving everything. Bank records, messages, screenshots, even that video clip. One by one. Carefully. Quietly. Because this time I wasn't just a mother. I was a woman preparing to take her life back. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I didn't know what time I'd fallen asleep, only that I'd made my decision during the night. I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. I looked at the folder sitting on the kitchen table, the one labeled Proof. Inside were the printouts, the screenshots, and that short video from the camera. Every page felt heavy, like a piece of my life turned into evidence. I called the number Gloria had given me. Parker and Associates, a woman's voice answered. I'd like to make an appointment, I said, with Rick Parker. Do you have a case type, ma'am? I hesitated. I'm not sure yet, but I think it's about my family fraud. There was a pause, then she said softly, we can see you at 10 a.m. At 9:30, I was already standing in front of the building, a plain brick office on a quiet street downtown. Nothing fancy, but solid. The kind of place that made you feel like someone inside still believed in fairness. When I stepped into the office, I heard a familiar laugh from one of the rooms. It took me a moment to recognize it. Deep, warm, with a trace of youth. Then I remembered. Rick Parker? He'd been one of my students almost 35 years ago. When he walked out to greet me, it was like time folded in half. Mrs. Doyle, he said, his eyes widening. I can't believe it. Hello, Rick, I said, smiling faintly. You grew up. He laughed softly. You taught me when I couldn't even write a proper essay. And now here you are, in my office. What brings you here, ma'am? I didn't answer right away. My voice trembled when I finally said, I need help. Something in his expression changed. The smile faded, replaced by quiet concern. Then you came to the right place, he said gently. Let's sit down. We went into his office. It was neat, filled with law books and old photos, one of them of a much younger Rick in a graduation robe, smiling with his parents. He motioned for me to sit and asked, "So, what's been going on?" I opened the folder and pushed it toward him. "It's my son," I said. "He's been taking money from me for years. He had me sign something I didn't fully understand, and now he controls my account." Rick didn't interrupt. He just nodded and listened as I talked. I told him about the withdrawals, the credit card, the video, the way Caleb spoke to me, as if I were a burden he had to manage. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking again. I looked down, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I sound foolish." He leaned forward, his voice steady. "No, you sound brave." I looked up. He smiled gently. "You once told our class that justice starts with not being afraid to tell the truth. I never forgot that. And now, Mrs. Doyle, it's my turn to remind you. That lesson still applies to you, too." For the first time in a long while, I felt tears coming. But not from sadness. Something about his words broke the weight I'd been carrying. Rick began flipping through the papers carefully. He took notes as he went. "This is a lot," he said quietly. "You've documented everything?" "Yes," I said. "Every message, every statement?" He nodded. "Good. You did exactly the right thing." He looked up again, serious now. "Mrs. Doyle, this isn't just a misunderstanding. What your son did, this is financial abuse. And legally, it's fraud. You have enough here to press charges or at least file a civil claim." I took a deep breath. "I don't want to send my son to jail, Rick. I want him to admit what he's done. I want him to see me as a person again, not a wallet." Rick looked at me for a long moment before answering. "Sometimes," he said softly, "that kind of admission only comes after justice steps in, not before." I sat there in silence, letting that sink in. He continued, "You don't have to decide today, but you do need to protect yourself. I'll help you file the first notices so he can't touch your accounts again, and we'll start a formal record. That way, if he tries anything else, the law is already on your side." His tone was calm, professional, but I could still hear the boy he used to be, the one who'd stayed after class to ask questions, who once wrote an essay about standing up for people who can't defend themselves. I smiled faintly. "You turned out all right, didn't you?" He grinned. "I had a good teacher." That made me laugh, a small sound that surprised me. I hadn't laughed in days. Rick printed some forms and handed them to me. "These will officially freeze joint access to your account until the investigation is complete. Once this is signed, he can't move another cent." I held the pen for a long time before signing. My hand didn't shake this time. When I gave the papers back, Rick said quietly, "You did the hardest part, Mrs. Doyle. You showed up." "Showing up feels like half the battle," I said. "It usually is," he replied. Before I left, he walked me to the door. "You're not alone in this," he said. "And remember, you're not just a mother. You're a person with rights. Don't let anyone make you forget that." I nodded, holding the folder close. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: safety. Not because the problem was gone, but because I finally had someone who believed me. As I stepped outside, the sunlight hit the pavement. I stopped for a moment, breathing it in. All those years, I taught children about courage, and somehow I'd forgotten how to use it myself. But now I remembered. A week after meeting with Rick, I still couldn't sleep through the night. Even though things were finally moving forward, the silence inside my house felt heavier than ever. Every time I walked past a photo of Caleb, I caught myself staring at it too long, trying to recognize the boy I'd raised. Then, one afternoon, Gloria knocked on my door with a flyer in her hand. "They're hosting a women's group at the church this week," she said. "Support for seniors who've been through situations like ours." I frowned. "You mean people who've been taken advantage of by their families?" She nodded. "Yes. Financial abuse, emotional manipulation, all of it. You should come." My first instinct was to say no. I didn't want to sit in a room full of strangers and talk about what my own son had done, but Gloria's voice was soft when she said, "You might feel less alone, Maggie." And maybe that was exactly what I needed. So the next morning, we went together. The church was only a few blocks away, tucked behind the park. It wasn't a fancy place, just a plain community hall with folding chairs, coffee in paper cups, and a circle of women who looked like they'd lived 100 quiet heartbreaks. A woman named Linda led the meeting. She introduced herself as a retired nurse. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "We're not here to judge or to give advice," she said. "We're here to listen. Sometimes that's all a person needs." I sat beside Gloria, clutching my bag like a shield. One by one, the women started sharing. Their voices were calm at first, then shaky, then strong again, a rhythm of pain and courage that filled the room. One woman, maybe in her 70s, said quietly, "My daughter made me sign papers for an apartment we were supposed to share. A few months later, she kicked me out. Said it was hers now. I ended up sleeping in my car for 3 weeks before my sister took me in." Another woman added, "My grandson opened a credit card under my name. By the time I found out, the debt was more than I could ever pay." A few heads nodded. No one gasped. It was as if we all recognized some piece of ourselves in each story. Then a soft-spoken woman in a gray sweater said something that made the whole room go still. "We aren't weak. We're just women who love too much, so much that we forgot to love ourselves." For a moment, nobody spoke. I felt the words hit deep in my chest. Something cracked open inside me. A place I'd been holding shut since the day Caleb told me he wanted my paycheck sent to his account. My throat tightened, and before I could stop it, tears spilled down my face. I didn't even try to wipe them away. Gloria placed a hand on my shoulder. I turned to her and whispered, "I thought I was the only one." She smiled sadly. "None of us are the only one, Maggie. That's the lie that keeps us quiet." When it was my turn to speak, I hesitated. My mouth felt dry. "I don't know where to start," I said softly. "Start wherever you need to," Linda said. So I told them. I told them about Caleb, how he used my trust to take control of my life, how he made me feel small, how I signed something I didn't understand because I wanted peace, not a fight. I told them about the night I found my account empty, about the shame, the silence, and the loneliness that followed. When I finished, the room was quiet. Not uncomfortable, just understanding. Then one woman across from me said, "You're not foolish. You're a mother." I nodded, tears still running down my cheeks. That's what I thought I was supposed to be. A mother who gives, who forgives, who understands. I never thought I had to protect myself from my own child. Linda leaned forward slightly. "Sometimes love needs boundaries, Maggie. Without them, love turns into permission, and permission turns into control." I sat there, breathing in those words. For the first time, I didn't feel ashamed for what had happened. I didn't feel like a victim who'd failed to see the signs. I felt like a person, a woman who had simply loved and been hurt for it. Gloria squeezed my hand again. I looked around the room, at all the faces, all the women who'd survived their own versions of the same betrayal, and something changed in me. The shame that had been sitting on my chest for months began to lift. When the meeting ended, Linda said, "We'll meet again next week. Bring someone who needs to hear they're not alone." I nodded. I didn't say it out loud, but I already knew who I wanted to bring. That night back at home, I sat in the same chair I'd sat in for weeks. But this time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel powerless. I thought about every woman in that circle. Different stories, same wound. We'd all been robbed, not just of money or security, but of dignity. Yet somehow, in losing everything, we'd found each other. I looked at the folder on my desk labeled proof. It didn't feel like a box of pain anymore. It felt like a key. For the first time since this began, I felt something like peace, the quiet kind that comes from knowing the truth doesn't need to be shouted to be real. When I signed the papers with Rick, I thought that was the end of it, that justice would quietly move forward one document at a time. But sometimes the truth doesn't stay quiet. Sometimes it finds its own way into the world. Rick filed the case that week. It felt strange seeing my name on legal forms, Margaret Doyle versus Caleb Doyle. I stared at the paper for a long time, my hand resting on the edge of the desk. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like grief written in ink. 2 days later, Gloria stopped by with her daughter, Nessa. I'd met her a few times before, a tall, confident woman in her 30s with the kind of calm energy that fills a room without trying. "Maggie," she said softly, sitting down across from me. "Mom told me what happened. I'm so sorry." I nodded. "It's not your fault, dear. It's just strange when the person who's supposed to protect you becomes the one you need protection from." She hesitated. "I'm an investigative reporter. I write about financial exploitation, especially of the elderly. I've covered a few cases like yours, but most women never speak up. Would you let me tell your story?" I blinked. "You mean in the news?" Yes, she said. We'd change names, keep your privacy. But people need to see what's happening behind closed doors. This isn't rare, Maggie. It's everywhere. Sons, daughters, grandkids, using digital tools to steal from their parents. It's invisible until someone talks. I felt my stomach twist. The thought of strangers reading about my life made me uneasy. But then I remembered the women in that church room. All those faces, all those stories. I took a breath. If my story can help someone else, then yes, you can tell it. Nessa smiled gently. Thank you. I'll be careful with every word. We spent the next 2 hours at my kitchen table. She recorded our conversation while I showed her the folder, the same one labeled proof, bank statements, screenshots, and that short clip from my security camera. When she watched the video, she covered her mouth. He took your card, she whispered. I nodded slowly. It only took a few seconds. That's how fast trust disappears. We sat in silence for a while. Then she said, You're brave, you know. Most people stay quiet out of shame. I smiled faintly. I was quiet long enough. Now I just want to breathe again. By the time she left, I didn't feel afraid anymore. I felt something new, a kind of calm resolve. A week later, the article came out. It was on the front page of the Charleston Tribune, The Digital Betrayal, when a son turns his mother into a client. Even without my name, everyone in our neighborhood knew. The story spread fast, faster than I expected. I received dozens of messages from women I'd never met, each saying some version of the same thing. Thank you for speaking up. I thought I was the only one. I read every message, every story. Some were heartbreaking, women who'd lost everything, who were too scared to report their own children. Others simply said, You gave me courage. But not everyone saw it that way. That night, while scrolling through my phone, I saw Caleb's name appear on my screen. It wasn't a message to me, it was a public post. His words cut sharper than I expected. Some people are easily manipulated. They get paranoid and forget who's really trying to help them. It's sad when outsiders twist family matters for attention. And then, a few hours later, another post. It's tragic how the elderly can be used by people who want to make a story out of nothing. Maybe some of them need professional help. My heart sank as I read it. He didn't mention my name, but he didn't need to. Everyone knew. For a moment, I almost deleted the article from my feed. I thought about calling Nessa to tell her to take it down. I thought about apologizing to Caleb, even though I'd done nothing wrong. That's what mothers do, isn't it? We apologize just to keep the peace. But then I stopped myself. I looked at those words again. Some people are easily manipulated. And for the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I felt sad for him, for the boy who used to promise he'd take care of me, for the man who now thought control was the same as love. I whispered, If I was ever manipulated, Caleb, it was by you. That thought didn't come from anger. It came from truth. The next morning, Nessa called. Are you okay? She asked. I saw his posts. We can issue a follow-up or take it down if you want. I said, No, leave it up. The story isn't about him anymore. It's about everyone like him, and everyone like me. She was quiet for a moment. You sure? Yes, I said. If I start hiding again, then he wins twice. First with my money, then with my silence. She exhaled. You're stronger than you think, Maggie. Maybe, I said, or maybe I just finally remembered who I am. That night I sat by the window scrolling through the comments under the article. Some were cruel, others kind, but mixed among them were stories, dozens of them. People saying, This happened to my mom, or my uncle took my grandmother's pension, or thank you for saying what we couldn't. I realized then that my pain had become something else, not a wound anymore, but a voice. The article had taken my story out of the shadows, and once the truth sees daylight, it never fully goes back. I closed my laptop and smiled faintly to myself. You wanted control, Caleb, I whispered, but the moment I spoke, you lost it. The day of the trial felt like something out of another life. When I walked into the courtroom, my knees were weak, but my mind was clear. I wasn't there as a mother begging for forgiveness anymore. I was there as a person demanding the truth. Rick walked beside me, steady as ever. He carried the folders, the papers, the evidence we'd spent weeks collecting. I clutched my purse, my hands trembling just enough to remind me I was still human. Across the room sat Caleb and Amelia. They both looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but smaller in the way guilt makes people shrink. Amelia's hands were clasped together tightly in her lap, while Caleb sat stiff, his jaw clenched. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge entered and everyone stood. When we sat again, I stared straight ahead, not at Caleb, not at the lawyers, just at the wooden edge of the table in front of me. I focused on breathing. Rick began speaking first. His voice was calm, confident, and respectful, the same tone I remembered from his school days, only stronger now. "Your Honor," he said, "this case isn't about misunderstanding. It's about manipulation, about a son using trust as a weapon against his mother." He laid out the documents one by one. The room was quiet except for the soft shuffle of paper. "This," he continued, "is the email that contained a falsified authorization form. The metadata shows it was modified before it was sent to Mrs. Doyle, and this is the bank record showing repeated transfers to the defendant's account, totaling $25,000. He handed copies to the judge and opposing counsel. "Next," he said, "a still image from Mrs. Doyle's home security camera. The defendant is seen holding her debit card during a visit 3 months before the account changes took place." There was a murmur in the room. I didn't look up. I already knew what that image showed. I'd seen it enough times to have it burned into my mind. Then Rick added quietly, "This is not a story of greed between strangers. It's a story of silence between family, the kind that costs more than money." The judge nodded, flipping through the evidence. When it was Caleb's lawyer's turn, he tried to soften everything. He said words like miscommunication and good intentions. He even mentioned filial responsibility. At one point, he looked at me and said, "My client's only mistake was caring too much." I almost laughed. Caring too much. Is that what they called it now? Taking what wasn't yours in the name of love? Then it was Caleb's turn to speak. The judge looked at him and said, "Mr. Doyle, do you have anything to say for yourself?" He stood, smoothing his tie. For the first time, he looked directly at me. His voice was quiet. "I just wanted to protect her," he said. "She's getting older. I was worried someone would scam her." I held his gaze. My hands were still trembling, but my voice wasn't when I finally spoke. "You didn't protect me, Caleb," I said. "You just didn't want to lose control of me. There's a difference." The room went silent. Even the air felt heavy. Caleb looked down, but I didn't. I'd spent too many years lowering my eyes. The judge finally spoke. "The evidence presented is clear. Financial exploitation of the elderly is a serious matter, especially when done by a family member. The court orders restitution of $25,000 and a 5-year injunction preventing the defendant from using or accessing any accounts or personal information belonging to the plaintiff." Then came the sound, the gavel hitting the block. 3 sharp knocks that echoed through the room like the closing of a door, firm, final, unchangeable. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Not because I was sad, but because something inside me loosened, something that had been clenched for months. Rick leaned over and whispered, "It's over." I nodded, tears filling my eyes. "No," I whispered back, "it's just beginning." When the judge left, the room emptied slowly. Amelia stood up first. She didn't look at me, just wiped her tears and followed Caleb out. He paused at the door for a second. I thought maybe he'd turn around, maybe he'd say something, anything. But he didn't. He just left. I sat there for a few more minutes after everyone was gone. The sound of the gavel still echoed in my head. It didn't sound like punishment. It sounded like release. Rick came back from speaking with the clerk. "You did it," he said softly. "You stood up." I smiled weakly. "You did most of the work." He shook his head. "You don't know, Maggie. You did the hard part long before today. You decided to stop being afraid." We walked outside together. The sun was bright, the air sharp and clean. People passed us on the courthouse steps, talking, laughing, living their lives, unaware that for one woman, my phone as soon as I opened my eyes. I didn't need to check if Caleb had called or if someone online was saying something cruel. Later that morning, Gloria came over holding her phone. "You've seen this?" she asked, waving it a little. I hadn't. On the screen was an article written by Nessa. The headline read, "Justice has a mother's name." She had written about courage, not revenge, not bitterness, but the simple act of telling the truth when it would have been easier to stay quiet. She didn't use my full name, but everyone knew. And this time, I didn't mind. The article went viral. People shared it with words like inspiring, heartbreaking, and necessary. Strangers from other cities sent letters to the church, thanking the woman in Charleston for standing up. Women wrote that they had opened their own bank statements that night for the first time in years. Some even said they'd called their children to talk, really talk, about trust, money, and respect. The story reached further than I could ever have imagined. Then came the news I hadn't expected. Rick called one morning. "Maggie," he said gently, "I thought you should hear it from me. Caleb's company has let him go." I stayed quiet for a long moment. "Why?" I finally asked, even though I already knew. "They said it's about professional ethics. They can't keep someone found guilty of financial misconduct, even if it's within a family." I nodded slowly. "I see." He hesitated. "Are you okay?" "Yes," I said after a pause. "I'm okay." But when I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the cup of tea in my hands. I wasn't happy about what had happened to him. I didn't feel proud or vindicated. It just hurt. The kind of hurt that doesn't scream anymore. It just sits quietly in your chest. A few days later, I heard from Gloria that Amelia had left. She'd packed her things, deleted her social media accounts, and disappeared from town. Someone said she'd been crying outside her parents' house, saying she didn't know who he really was. Maybe she didn't. Maybe I didn't either. The neighborhood grew quiet again. No more whispers, no more pitying looks. People still talked, but now their words carried a tone of respect, not curiosity. When I went to the grocery store, someone I barely knew stopped me and said, "You did the right thing." I just smiled. I did what I had to. That night, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom. The same mirror I'd looked into every morning for decades, fixing my hair before work, before birthdays, before funerals, before all the days that came and went without much meaning. This time, I looked longer. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same one who'd signed that paper months ago. My hair was still gray, my hands still thin, but my eyes were clearer. I whispered, "You made it." I thought about the years I'd spent teaching children to be honest, kind, and responsible. I thought about how I'd taught Caleb those same lessons, believing that if I gave him enough love, he'd carry them forever. Now, I was teaching myself something new. That love without boundaries isn't love at all. In the reflection, I said softly, "I taught my son to be honest. Now I'm teaching myself to be brave." The words stayed in the air for a long moment. Then I smiled just a little. Later, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunset over the quiet street. The air smelled of rain. I could hear distant laughter from a neighbor's yard. For once, I didn't feel like a bystander in my own life. The world hadn't magically healed. My heart hadn't either. But it was enough to know that I had survived something that was meant to silence me. And in surviving, I had given other women permission to speak. I picked up my phone, opened the message Nessa had sent earlier. "Maggie, you changed more than your own story. You made people listen." I typed back, "Thank you for helping me be heard." Then I put the phone down, leaned back in the chair, and let the quiet fill the space around me. Somewhere out there, Caleb was learning what it meant to face consequences, not from anger or punishment, but from truth. And maybe, someday, he'd understand that this wasn't about destroying him. It was about saving myself. When I left Charleston, it didn't feel like running away. It felt like finally walking towards something. Peace, maybe, or just the space to breathe. I sold the old house, packed a few boxes, and moved to Folly Beach. The house I found wasn't much, a small place with peeling white paint and creaky floors. But it faced the ocean. The woman who sold it told me it used to belong to a fisherman's widow. She had called it the lighthouse. I liked that. It sounded like something steady, something that survives storms. My first morning there, I woke up to the sound of waves instead of city noise. I made coffee, opened the window, and let the salty air roll in. It smelled like freedom and memory all at once. I sat by the window with my mug, watching the seagulls glide low over the sand. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone to knock on the door. There were no Friday dinners, no anxious thoughts about bills, no phone calls that made my chest tighten. Just me, the ocean, and the quiet rhythm of life beginning again. Some afternoons, I'd take long walks along the shore. I didn't think much during those walks, just listen to the waves and let the wind carry whatever was left of the pain out to sea. Healing didn't happen all at once. Some days I still woke up angry or sad or wishing things had gone differently, but the feelings came softer now, like tides. They rose, they fell, they passed. Gloria called me every Sunday. She'd ask, "So how's life by the sea, my rebel friend?" And I'd laugh. "I'm still learning how to sit still," I'd tell her. "Turns out peace can be loud when you're not used to it." Sometimes I'd get letters from people I didn't know, women from other states, even other countries. They had read about me, about what happened, and they wrote to say thank you. One letter said, "You made me realize it's not unkind to protect myself." Another said, "I thought I was weak until I saw what you did." I kept them all in a shoebox on my bookshelf. On bad days, I'd open the box and remind myself that the pain had meant something, that my story had become more than just something that broke me. It had become something that helped someone else. One bright morning, I saw a familiar car pull up outside. Rick stepped out, holding a newspaper in his hand. He still wore the same slightly wrinkled suit, but there was a warmth in his eyes that I hadn't seen since the trial. "Thought I'd come see how you're settling in," he said. "Come in, Rick," I told him. "Coffee's on the stove." We sat on the porch. He unfolded the paper and pointed to an article on the second page. "Look at this," he said. "Another woman came forward this week, said your story gave her the courage to report her son's fraud. That's the third one this month. You've started something, Maggie." I took the paper and read the headline. "Standing Up to Family Betrayal, Inspired by a Mother's Courage." I smiled. "I didn't mean to start anything," I said. He shook his head. "You didn't mean to, but you did. Sometimes all it takes is one person saying enough." The wind picked up a little, carrying the sound of the sea into the porch. I looked out at the horizon, the endless line where the sky met the water. "If I could save even one person from feeling what I felt," I said quietly, "from that moment when you realize your own child has stopped loving you the way you thought they did, then it's all worth it." Rick nodded slowly. "You did more than that." We sat there for a long while without talking, just two people listening to the sound of the waves and the creak of the old porch beneath us. Before he left, he stood at the edge of the steps and said, "You named the house the lighthouse for a reason, didn't you?" I smiled. "No, it was already called that." "Then it found the right owner," he said. After he drove away, I stayed outside until the sun began to sink into the water. The sky turned gold, then pink, then a soft violet. I thought about all the things that had been taken from me: money, trust, the idea of safety. But I also thought about what I'd found: strength, peace, and a voice I didn't know I had. I went inside, poured another cup of coffee, and stood by the window. The ocean was dark now, but I could still hear it. Steady, endless, forgiving. I whispered to myself, "You did it, Maggie. You made it through." Then I laughed softly because for once it didn't feel like I was talking to someone broken. It felt like I was talking to someone whole. It was late when it happened. The kind of late where the world has already gone to sleep and only the sea is still awake. The house was dark, the air heavy with salt and wind. I was sitting by the window, a blanket over my shoulders, listening to the waves when my phone lit up. The screen glowed in the quiet room. One message. Caleb. I hadn't seen his name appear for months. For a moment, my hands froze above the phone. I could feel my heart start to beat faster, the way it always did when it came to him. Half fear, half something I didn't want to name anymore. The message was short. "Mom, I'm sorry. I lost everything. I just want to hear your voice." I stared at the words until the screen dimmed and went dark again. Then I pressed it awake, read it one more time, as if maybe the meaning would change. But it didn't. There was no warmth in the message, no reflection, no understanding of what he'd done. Just emptiness, the kind that comes when someone regrets the consequences, not the choices. For a long moment, I just sat there. The phone in my hand felt heavier than it should have. The air in the room was still, but my chest ached. I thought about all the nights I'd cried over that boy, the son I had once believed would never hurt me. I thought about the court, the headlines, the people who'd called me brave when all I'd really done was survive. And I thought about what Gloria had said that night at her kitchen table. Loving your child doesn't mean giving them everything. It means knowing when to stop letting them hurt you. That line had saved me once, and now it saved me again. I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering over the reply box. A dozen thoughts crossed my mind. Maybe I should answer. Maybe I should tell him I forgive him. Maybe he's finally learned something. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't about forgiveness, it was about control. One last reach for the piece of me he used to hold. I locked the screen and set the phone face down on the table. Then I turned off the lamp. Outside, the ocean was restless. The waves rolled in steady, like breathing, constant, unbothered, eternal. I sat there listening to it until my heartbeat matched its rhythm. I whispered more to myself than to anyone else. Some apologies don't come from remorse. They come from fear, and I don't owe fear an answer. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel anger either. Just peace. The quiet kind that comes when you stop waiting for someone to fix what they broke. I stood, walked to the porch, and stepped into the night air. The sky was full of stars, and the sea glimmered faintly under the moonlight. The lighthouse down the coast blinked on and off, steady, patient, doing its job. I thought about how fitting that was. A light doesn't chase the lost ships. It just stays where it is, shining, in case they ever decide to find their way back. Maybe one day, Caleb would. Maybe he wouldn't. Either way, I'd still be here. I went back inside, poured myself a small cup of tea, and sat down at the table. The phone was still there, silent. I let it stay that way. The waves outside kept their rhythm, endless, forgiving, and alive, and somewhere between their sound and the quiet hum of the night, I realized something. I had spent years trying to be a mother who never gave up on her son. But maybe, for once, it was enough to be a woman who didn't give up on herself. The mornings at the lighthouse had fallen into rhythm, coffee, waves, quiet. Every day felt simple, steady. I didn't need to count the hours anymore. They passed like the tide, gentle, inevitable, and mine. One afternoon, I found an old notebook tucked in one of the kitchen drawers. The cover was blank, a little worn at the edges. I sat down at the table, opened it, and let the pen rest between my fingers for a long time before writing the first line. I used to think loving my child meant giving everything away. Now I know that real love means keeping the part of myself that was never loved at all. I paused after writing it. The words didn't feel bitter, they felt clean, like air after a storm. For the first time, I wasn't writing as a mother trying to explain herself. I was writing as a woman who had lived, lost, and learned where to draw the line between love and surrender. Outside, the ocean moved in slow rhythm. The sound of the waves slipped through the open window, a sound that had become part of my days and part of my healing. Every wave felt like a breath, coming in, going out, steady and alive. I thought about everything that had brought me here, the papers, the court, the silence, the noise. It all seemed so far away now. The hurt hadn't vanished, but it no longer owned me. It lived behind me, not inside me. And that was enough. I turned another page in the notebook and wrote a few more lines, not for anyone else to read, just for myself. Maybe peace doesn't mean forgetting. Maybe it just means not needing the pain to make sense anymore. I closed the notebook and placed it on the table beside my coffee. The cup was half empty, the steam gone, but the warmth still lingered. As the afternoon light shifted, I walked outside to the porch. The air smelled of salt and sun. The ocean stretched endlessly ahead, blue and alive. I stood there, watching the waves break against the sand, each one different, each one the same. Somewhere in the distance, a ship's horn echoed, low, slow, fading into the horizon. I thought of all the people I'd met along the way, Gloria, Rick, Nessa, and how they'd appeared at the exact moments I needed them most. Life has a way of sending you the right people once you stop trying to survive it alone. I looked back at the house, small, imperfect, but full of light. I had named it the lighthouse without realizing how true it would become. Not because it saved anyone else, but because it reminded me that I could be my own light. The sky began to turn gold, the kind of gold that only comes at the end of a long day, or a long story. I sat on the porch steps, the wind in my hair, the sound of the sea filling the spaces where words used to be. I closed my eyes and whispered the only truth I was sure of now. I'm still here, and I'm enough. The camera would pull back then, slow, quiet, distant. The little house, the open sea, the fading sun. The world looked peaceful, not because it was perfect, but because she had made peace with it.